A billionaire CEO abandoned his wife. 10 years later, he sees her in the mall with twins who look like. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The late afternoon light poured through the glass walls of Westford Mall, turning the polished tiles into mirrors of gold and shadow. Jonathan Reed adjusted the cuffs of his tailored suit as he walked past the luxury stores, his reflection sharp, flawless, and utterly empty. 10 years of running a multinational company had taught him how to hide exhaustion behind authority, guilt behind success. Yet lately, even the gleam of accomplishment failed to quiet the ache that followed him like a ghost. Somewhere between the fragrance counter and the echo of children laughing, the ghost took shape. Two small voices called out near the fountain. The sound hit him harder than any business blow ever had. He turned instinctively, scanning the crowd. A young woman was kneeling beside two children who looked no older than 6 or 7, helping them tie their shoes. Something in the way one boy wrinkled his nose when he laughed froze Jonathan in place. The same dimple, the same dark eyes he saw every morning in the mirror. His pulse stumbled. The world around him dimmed to a low hum. She stood up, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, and for a moment he forgot how to breathe. It was Claire, the woman he had once sworn to love, the woman he had left behind when ambition had spoken louder than his heart. 10 years had passed, but time had only deepened the grace in her movements. There were faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the kind drawn by sleepless nights and unspoken strength. She looked happy in a way he had not been for a very long time. Jonathan stepped back into the shadow of a pillar, afraid to be seen, yet unable to look away. The twins tugged at her hands, their laughter pure, unburdened. One of them pointed toward the candy stall, and she smiled, that same gentle curve of lips that had once disarmed him during the hardest days of his early career. He swallowed hard. Could it be possible? 10 years since the divorce papers, 10 years since that night, he had walked out believing success would fill the emptiness she left. The logical part of him whispered that it was coincidence, that children could look like anyone, but the human part, the forgotten part, knew better. He remembered the last words she had said before the door closed between them forever. Someday, you will see your reflection in smaller eyes and understand what you threw away. Now those words echoed with terrifying clarity. The twins laughed again, and the sound felt like forgiveness he did not deserve. Jonathan took a hesitant step forward, heart pounding, a decade of regret pressing on his chest. He did not yet know what he would say, or if he had the right to say anything at all, but destiny had already begun to pull its invisible strings, and for the first time in 10 years, the man who had everything realized he might have nothing that truly mattered. Jonathan Reed stood frozen near the marble pillar, the sound of rushing water from the mall fountain blending with the rapid beat of his own heart. Claire was right there, only a few yards away, her hair now a soft chestnut brown tied loosely at the back, her posture calm and graceful as she guided the two children through the small crowd. He had not seen her in 10 years, not since that winter morning when she had refused to sign the non-disclosure agreement his lawyers had brought after the divorce. He had told himself he did not need closure, that walking away was easier than facing what he had broken. But now, seeing her with those two little lives beside her, the illusion shattered like thin glass. One of the twins, the boy, dropped his ice cream cone and pouted in disappointment. Without hesitation, Claire knelt, wiping his hands with a tissue from her purse, her tone gentle but firm. "It is all right, sweetheart. We will get another one." The girl giggled, teasing her brother, and Jonathan felt a strange twist inside his chest. Their laughter was a melody he recognized, though he had never heard it before. He took a step forward, then stopped himself. What was he doing? A billionaire CEO, a man who had conquered markets and boardrooms, now standing in the middle of a mall, hiding behind a column like a guilty stranger. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were not hers. Maybe he was seeing what his conscience wanted to see. Yet the closer he looked, the less he could deny it. The girl's eyes were the exact shade of his mother's, and the boy had that slight tilt of chin Jonathan used to see in every mirror before he learned to smile for cameras. Claire's voice carried faintly over the noise of shoppers, a soothing rhythm that once anchored his chaos. He remembered the nights when she would wait up for him, her hands cold from washing dishes after midnight, her words still warm with hope. "We can make it through this, Jonathan. Money cannot build a home, only hearts can." He had brushed her off, convinced she did not understand the pressure of building an empire. Back then, he believed love was a luxury, not a necessity. Now, watching her adjust the collar of her son's jacket, he realized how wrong he had been. The years had been kind to her in ways that had nothing to do with wealth. She looked content, fulfilled, and surrounded by a peace he could not buy. He wanted to speak, to call her name, but his throat tightened. What would he even say? "I'm sorry. Are they mine?" No sentence seemed worthy of the decade he had stolen. His phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking the spell. It was his assistant reminding him about a meeting downtown. For the first time in years, he ignored the notification. He kept his eyes on the twins as they wandered toward the bookstore, their small hands gripping Claire's. When she glanced around, her gaze brushed past him for half a second. He froze again. Did she see him? There was a flicker of recognition, or maybe it was just a shadow of memory. She turned away quickly, as if uncertain. Jonathan exhaled shakily, the weight of unfinished words pressed against his ribs. He followed them at a distance, careful not to alarm anyone. Every step felt like walking through old regrets. Inside the bookstore, Claire guided the twins toward the children's section. They sat cross-legged on the carpet, flipping through a picture book. Claire's laugh echoed softly when the boy tried to read aloud, mispronouncing a word. Jonathan could not look away. For a fleeting second, it felt like time had folded in on itself, and he was watching the life that could have been his if he had chosen differently. A clerk passed by and greeted Claire by name. "Good to see you, Miss Bennett. The usual weekend story time?" "Yes," Claire smiled. "They love it." Bennett. She was using her maiden name again. Jonathan repeated it in his mind like a confession. She had erased him so completely that even her name no longer carried a trace of him. The realization stung more than he expected. The twins laughed again, pointing to the colorful illustrations, their joy so pure that it felt sacred. Jonathan backed away slowly, afraid to disturb the fragile piece in front of him. His hand brushed against the ring he still carried in his coat pocket, a band he never threw away. The memory of their wedding day flashed like an old photograph. Claire's hand in his, the promise of forever shining in her eyes. He had broken that promise, and now he stood as a stranger outside the glass walls of her new life. As he turned to leave, the boy suddenly looked up and met his gaze through the reflection on the bookstore window. For an instant, Jonathan felt seen completely, wordlessly seen. The boy tilted his head, curious, and then smiled. Jonathan's breath caught. He could not move. The sound of Claire's voice pulled the child's attention back, and the moment ended. Jonathan walked away, his reflection vanishing into the crowd, but his heart stayed behind, anchored to the echo of two small voices calling for their mother. Jonathan Reed did not sleep that night. The city skyline glowed outside his penthouse window, its lights flickering like distant memories he could never reach. Every sound of traffic below reminded him of the laughter he had heard that afternoon, the laughter of two children who might share his blood. He poured himself a glass of water and stared at his reflection in the dark window. The man looking back at him was powerful, polished, and utterly miserable. He had thought success would silence regret, but now every board meeting, every speech, every headline about his achievements felt meaningless. When he closed his eyes, he did not see contracts or skyscrapers. He saw a little boy's smile reflected in a bookstore window. He saw Claire's calm eyes, steady and self-reliant. The next morning, he arrived at his office earlier than usual. The building was quiet except for the low hum of the cleaning crew. His assistant, Martha, appeared in the doorway with her usual clipboard. "Good morning, Mr. Reed. Your 9 o'clock meeting has been moved to 10. Do you need coffee?" "No," he said, his voice lower than usual. "Cancel everything before noon." She blinked, surprised, but nodded and left. Jonathan opened his laptop, searching without thinking. It took only a few minutes to find what he was looking for. Claire Bennett, accounting manager, registered at a small community center in Westbrook. No mention of marital status, but there was a volunteer listing. She taught financial literacy workshops for single mothers every weekend. His throat tightened as he read the description. It was exactly what she used to dream of doing. "Someday, I want to help women who do not get second chances," she had told him once. He had laughed then, telling her that dreams did not pay bills. Now he realized she had turned that dream into something real without him. He closed the laptop, exhaling shakily. The logical part of him wanted to call his lawyer, to confirm facts, to order a discreet DNA test, but another part of him, the part that still remembered the warmth of her hand, knew he could not treat this like a business transaction. He needed to see her again, not as a CEO, not as a man seeking proof, but as someone seeking forgiveness. That evening, Jonathan drove to Westbrook. The sun dipped low, painting the streets in copper and rose. He parked near the community center, a modest brick building with a small playground beside it. The air smelled faintly of cut grass and coffee from the cafe across the street. Through the windows, he saw Claire talking to a group of women seated in a circle. Her voice carried through the open door, clear and warm. "Remember, financial independence starts with belief," she said, her hands moving as she explained a chart on the whiteboard. "You do not have to start with much. You just have to start." The women nodded, taking notes. Jonathan watched from the hallway, unseen, his chest tightening with pride and sorrow. She had built something meaningful. She had found her purpose. When the class ended, Claire helped stack chairs while the twins ran around the hallway, their backpacks bouncing. They stopped near a vending machine, arguing softly over which snack to choose. Jonathan stood still, unsure whether to approach. The boy noticed him first, tilting his head with that same curious expression as before. "Hi," the child said, smiling up at him. Jonathan froze, his pulse quickening. The girl joined, holding a juice box. "Mom says we should not talk to strangers," she said politely but firmly. Claire turned at the sound of her daughter's voice, and for the first time in a decade, their eyes met without glass or distance between them. The air seemed to vanish. She went pale, her hand tightening on the chair she was holding. "Jonathan," she breathed, disbelief and something unspoken mixing in her tone. He took a hesitant step forward. "Hello, Claire." His voice cracked slightly, betraying the emotion he tried to hide. The twins looked between them, confused but curious. "Mom, do you know him?" the boy asked. Claire straightened, regaining her composure. "Yes," she said softly. "I knew him a long time ago." Jonathan swallowed hard. He wanted to say everything at once, to apologize, to explain, to ask, but the words tangled inside him. Claire's expression was unreadable, calm yet distant, like someone standing behind a locked door. "Why are you here?" she asked quietly. "I am not sure," he admitted. "Maybe because I finally realized what I lost." She looked away, her jaw tightening. "You should not be here." "Maybe not," he said gently, "but I needed to see you." Before she could respond, the twins tugged her hands, asking if they could visit the playground. She nodded, her eyes never leaving Jonathan's. 5 minutes, she told them. When they ran off, she turned back to him. "You left us," she said simply, the words cutting through him like wind through glass. He could not argue. He could only whisper, "I know." The distance between them felt both impossible and necessary. Claire crossed her arms, glancing toward the children, her voice steady but low. "Do not bring chaos into their peace, Jonathan. They deserve better." Her words were not angry, just heartbreakingly calm. Jonathan nodded, understanding the warning, yet unable to walk away again. The sound of the twins laughing outside drifted through the open door, a melody of what could have been, and what might still be if redemption had any room left to grow. The evening air outside the community center carried the soft scent of rain on pavement as the sky deepened into shades of indigo. Claire guided the twins toward the playground, their laughter floating across the dim parking lot. Jonathan followed a few steps behind, unsure if he was allowed to exist in this small world of hers. He stopped near the swings, watching as the children climbed and shouted with innocent delight. Claire stood at the edge of the playground, arms crossed, her posture steady but guarded. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the creak of the swings and the rhythmic beat of small shoes against gravel. Jonathan finally broke the silence. "They are beautiful," he said softly. Claire's eyes did not leave her children. "Yes, they are my whole world." He hesitated, the weight of a decade pressing on his shoulders. "Claire, I did not know. I swear to you, I did not know you were pregnant when—" She turned sharply, her eyes flashing in the fading light. "Do not," she said, her voice quiet but sharp as glass. "You left because you wanted to. You made your choice, Jonathan. Whether you knew or not does not erase what happened." He swallowed hard. "I was young," foolish, obsessed with work. I thought I was giving you freedom from my chaos." She shook her head slowly. "You thought you were escaping responsibility. There is a difference." Her words landed like stones in his chest. The twins ran up, giggling, each holding a small dandelion puff. "Mom, look," the boy said, his grin wide and fearless. "Make a wish." Claire knelt between them, her expression softening instantly. "All right," she said. "Close your eyes." They did, their tiny hands clutching the flowers as they blew the seeds into the evening air. The fragile white tufts drifted away, catching the last of the sunlight. Jonathan felt his throat tighten again. He wanted to kneel beside them, to be part of that moment, but he stayed where he was. When the children ran back toward the slide, Claire stood and faced him once more. "They do not know about you," she said. "They think their father passed away before they were born. It was easier that way." The words hit him harder than he expected. He nodded slowly, understanding and despair colliding inside him. "I see." Claire looked away, her voice keener now. "I did not want them to grow up resenting someone who chose ambition over love. They deserve peace, not the shadow of your guilt." Jonathan's gaze drifted to the twins, their laughter rising again like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "They deserve everything," he murmured. "If I could give them the world—" "You already had the chance," she interrupted gently. "You had the world, Jonathan. You just did not know how to share it." He could not argue. He could only stand there, humbled by the truth he had avoided for so long. The boy tripped slightly while running, scraping his knee. Claire rushed to him instantly, her tone soothing. Jonathan moved forward on instinct, pulling a handkerchief from his pocket. She hesitated but allowed him to hand it to her. Their fingers brushed for a brief second, warm skin, cold memory. The contact lingered longer in his mind than it should have. She cleaned the small wound with practiced care, pressing a kiss to her son's forehead before helping him stand. "Thank you," she said quietly, not meeting his eyes. "You are welcome," he replied, his voice rough. The girl came running, taking her brother's hand. "Come on, we are going to miss the story time," she exclaimed. Claire smiled at them, her expression softening again, then turned back to Jonathan. "This is their life," she said, almost to herself. "Simple, safe. I built it piece by piece, without help, without favors." "I can see that," Jonathan said, admiration threading through his pain. "You have done what I never could, create something pure." Claire's eyes met his for a fleeting second. "Maybe purity only grows where power does not reach." The words hung in the air like a quiet verdict. The twins called for her, and she began to walk away. Jonathan stayed behind, his hands buried in his coat pockets, his heart heavy but strangely alive for the first time in years. He watched her silhouette fade into the warm glow of the streetlights, the children skipping beside her. In that moment, he understood that redemption would not come from money or status. It would come from humility, from standing still and facing what he had once run from. As the night settled, he whispered to himself, "I will not disappear again." The promise was fragile but real, carried on the same breeze that still held the last drifting seeds of the twins' wishes. The next morning arrived with grey clouds stretching over the city, soft rain tapping against the tall glass windows of Jonathan Reed's office. He sat behind his desk, staring at the untouched cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The memory of Claire's voice from the night before echoed in his mind, steady and calm, telling him not to bring chaos into their peace. Yet chaos was already within him. For the first time in years, the empire he had built seemed meaningless compared to the small, fragile world she had created without him. His assistant, Martha, stepped into the office. "Mr. Reed, you have a conference call with the Tokyo partners in 10 minutes. He shook his head. "Reschedule it. Tell them something came up." Martha blinked, startled. In the years she had worked for him, she had never seen him cancel a meeting. She nodded slowly and closed the door. Jonathan turned toward the rain-slick skyline, his reflection faint against the glass. He thought about the twins, about the way the boy had smiled through his scraped knee, about the little girl's protective tone when she said they should not talk to strangers. They had spirit, they had kindness, and he had missed every moment that shaped them into who they were. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a worn photograph, one of the few he had kept after the divorce. It was taken on a summer evening long ago, back when he and Claire still lived in their small apartment above a bakery. Her hair was tied back, her smile easy, her hands covered in flour from baking cookies she swore were barely edible. He had been holding her close, their laughter captured mid-motion. Looking at it now, the image felt like a different lifetime. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. The caller ID showed his head of security, Tom Alvarez. "Sir," Tom said when Jonathan answered, "you asked me to gather information about a community center in Westbrook. Should I proceed?" Jonathan paused. The instinctive businessman in him wanted to say yes, to collect every detail, to control the narrative. But then he remembered Claire's eyes when she said, "Do not bring chaos into their peace." He took a slow breath. "No, Tom, drop it. Do not look into it further." There was confusion on the other end. "Understood, sir." Jonathan ended the call and leaned back, closing his eyes. For once, he wanted to approach something not with power, but with sincerity. That evening, he drove again to Westbrook, parking near the same cafe across from the community center. Through the window, he saw Claire with the twins, sitting at a small table. The children were coloring while she checked her phone. They looked ordinary, peaceful, safe. He stayed in the car for several minutes, unsure if he should approach. Then fate intervened. The boy spilled his orange juice across the table, soaking the papers. Claire jumped to grab napkins, but the stack on the counter was empty. Before he could think twice, Jonathan stepped out of his car, walked inside, and handed a pack of napkins from his coat pocket. Claire froze when she looked up. "Thank you," she said quietly. Her voice carried both politeness and caution. The twins looked at him curiously. "You again," the girl said with a faint smile. "Are you following us?" Jonathan's lips curved slightly. "No," he said gently. "Just coincidence, I suppose." Claire's eyes met his. "There is no such thing as coincidence with you." Her tone was cool but not cruel. He wanted to say something meaningful, something that would make her understand he was not here to take anything away. "I would like to help," he said softly. "Not interfere, not change anything. Just help." She shook her head. "They do not need help. They have what they need." "What about you?" he asked. The question hung in the air longer than he expected. Claire looked down at the twins, then back at him. "I have peace," she said simply. "That is more than I ever had before." He nodded, unable to argue. "If you ever need anything—" "I will not," she interrupted, though her tone softened slightly. "But thank you." The boy tugged her sleeve. "Mom, can he sit with us?" Claire hesitated, torn between instinct and grace. Finally, she sighed. "For a few minutes," she said. Jonathan sat at the corner of the table, his movements careful. The twins showed him their drawings, bright colors, stick figures, a sun bigger than the house. "That is wonderful," he said with genuine warmth. "You are both very talented." The girl beamed proudly. Claire watched him silently, searching for signs of manipulation but finding none. For a few fragile minutes, they were simply four people sharing space, the noise of the cafe blending with quiet laughter. When they left, Claire thanked him again, her tone distant but polite. Jonathan watched them walk into the fading daylight, a faint smile on his face. It was the first time in 10 years he felt a small crack of hope, as if forgiveness was not entirely out of reach, just hidden behind the patience he needed to learn. The rain had stopped by the time Jonathan Reed returned to his car that evening, but the world around him still felt heavy with unspoken emotions. He sat behind the steering wheel for a long time, his hands resting motionless, his thoughts spinning. The sound of the twins' laughter from the cafe lingered in his ears, and for the first time in 10 years, the silence inside his car did not feel like peace. It felt like punishment. The next few days blurred together. He went to work, attended meetings, gave speeches, and signed contracts, but every moment felt like an echo of something hollow. His assistants noticed the change. He was quieter, more thoughtful, sometimes staring at nothing for several minutes before answering a question. One evening, he found himself back in Westbrook again without remembering why he had driven there. The community center lights were still on, a soft glow spilling through the windows. Claire was inside, arranging books on a table while the twins colored in a corner. Jonathan stood outside, watching from across the street. He did not go in this time. He just stood there, feeling the ache of distance. He realized then that love was not about grand gestures or lavish gifts. It was about showing up, about presence, about staying when things were difficult. He had failed at that once. Maybe this was his chance to learn. The next morning, he called the director of his company's philanthropic branch. "I want a new project approved," he said firmly. "Community redevelopment in Westbrook. focus on education and family support programs. The director hesitated. That area does not have any business advantage, sir. It is not about business, Jonathan replied. It is about doing the right thing. Within a week, plans began moving. Funds were approved quietly, without public announcements. He did not want recognition. He only wanted to see that community flourish the place Claire had built her new life. A few evenings later, Claire found a notice pinned on the community center's board. New funding had been granted for expanded programs and repairs to the aging building. The staff was overjoyed, but she frowned slightly. Something about it felt too convenient. She suspected, deep down, that Jonathan had something to do with it. When she saw him again 2 days later, her suspicion was confirmed. He was sitting outside the cafe once more, this time with a book in his hands instead of his phone. She approached cautiously. "Was it you?" she asked without preamble. He looked up, his expression calm. "What do you mean?" "The grant," she said. "The renovation funds. Was it your company?" Jonathan hesitated before nodding. "Yes, but it was not meant to be a message. I just wanted to help." "You are helping with money again," she said quietly. "That is how you always fix things, by paying for them." He nodded slowly, accepting the truth in her words. "It is all I know how to do," he admitted, "but I am trying to learn a different way." Her gaze softened slightly, though her guard did not drop. "You cannot buy your way into their lives," she said, glancing toward the twins inside the cafe window. "I know," he said. "That is why I have not tried." They stood in silence for a long moment, the hum of passing cars filling the space between them. Finally, she spoke again. "Why now, Jonathan? Why come back after all this time?" His voice was low, almost breaking. "Because I saw what I had lost, and because I realized success means nothing if there is no one left to share it with." She looked away, blinking back a sudden wave of emotion. "You cannot just walk in and rewrite the past." "I am not trying to rewrite it," he said. "I am trying to understand it, to face what I ran from." A gust of wind swept through the street, rustling the paper napkins on nearby tables. Claire's hair moved with it, catching the faint glow of the streetlights. She sighed. "You always had the right words. That was never the problem." "Then let my actions speak this time," he said softly. "I will not disturb your peace, Claire. I just want you to know that I am still here." She gave him a long, unreadable look before turning to go inside. The door closed gently behind her, and Jonathan remained outside, alone with the steady rhythm of his heart, realizing that redemption was not a single moment of forgiveness, but a lifetime of small, unseen acts of sincerity. The following week brought the first clear days of spring, sunlight spilling across the streets of Westbrook and softening the edges of everything it touched. The community center was alive with activity as volunteers painted walls, planted flowers, and repaired the playground fence. Jonathan Reed stood quietly at a distance, watching the transformation unfold. He had not told anyone it was his company's funding behind the renovations, and seeing people's joy without knowing who to thank made him strangely content. Claire moved among the volunteers, her hair tied back, her laughter carrying faintly through the breeze. The twins helped by handing out paintbrushes, their clothes already dotted with bright colors. Jonathan smiled faintly when he saw them argue over who was better at painting. For a brief, impossible moment, he allowed himself to imagine being part of that picture. When Claire finally noticed him standing near the gate, her expression shifted from surprise to cautious curiosity. She wiped her hands on her jeans and approached him slowly. "I thought I told you not to interfere," she said, though there was no anger in her tone this time. "You did," he replied, "but I thought maybe I could participate instead." She arched an eyebrow. "You? In that suit?" He looked down at himself and actually laughed, the sound foreign even to his own ears. "Maybe I came unprepared." She studied him for a moment, then handed him a spare roller. "All right, Mr. CEO, let us see if you can handle real work." He accepted it without hesitation and joined the volunteers near the wall. The others looked at him curiously, not recognizing the famous face hidden behind rolled-up sleeves and humility. For the next hour, he worked silently, following instructions, painting the lower panels where the children could not reach. Claire passed by occasionally, glancing his way, perhaps surprised that he had not left after a few minutes. Sweat dampened his shirt, paint smudged his hands, but for the first time in years, he felt something real connection. When the twins came over to inspect his work, the boy laughed. "You missed a spot," he said, pointing. Jonathan smiled. "I guess I am not as good as you." The The girl handed him a paper cup of lemonade. "Mom says you should drink before you fall over." Her voice was teasing but kind. He accepted the drink, his throat tightening at the simple gesture. "Tell your mom she is probably right," Claire called out then, summoning the twins to help with another task. As they ran off, she looked at Jonathan again, her eyes thoughtful. "You really showed up," she said quietly. "I said I would," he replied. "This is not a photo opportunity or a press release. It is just me trying to be useful." She nodded slowly, still uncertain but less defensive than before. "People do not change overnight, Jonathan, but maybe they can start somewhere." "Then this is my start," he said softly. The afternoon stretched into early evening. When the work was done, the volunteers gathered outside for snacks and laughter. Jonathan stayed on the sidelines, not wanting to intrude, yet content just to watch. At one point, the boy tripped while running, and Jonathan instinctively moved to help, catching him before he fell. The child looked up, startled but smiling. "Thanks, mister." Jonathan smiled back, feeling something break open in his chest. "You are welcome." Claire had seen it happen. She said nothing, but her gaze lingered on him longer than before, a small crack in the wall she had built around her heart. When the cleanup ended, Jonathan helped carry boxes to her car. She closed the trunk and turned to him. "You surprised me today," she said quietly. "In a good way?" he asked. "In a confusing way," she admitted, her lips curving faintly. "You always used to talk about efficiency and profit. Now you are painting walls. Maybe I am learning that some things are worth more than profit," he said, meeting her eyes. For a moment, neither looked away. The air between them felt different, no longer sharp with resentment, but softer, heavier with what might still be possible. The twins called for her again, breaking the spell. Claire gave him a small nod before walking away, her children running beside her. Jonathan stood under the fading sunlight, paint still streaked across his hands, and realized he had not felt this human in years. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was hope, and that was enough for him to keep showing up. Days turned into weeks, and Jonathan Reed kept showing up at the community center every Saturday. Sometimes he helped repair equipment, sometimes he carried boxes or read stories to children during the weekend programs. He never announced who he was or what he owned, and no one treated him differently. It was the first time in his life that people saw him not as a CEO, but as a man simply trying to do something good. Claire began to grow used to seeing him there, though she still kept her guard up. The twins had taken a liking to him quickly, unaware of their real connection. The boy often followed him around, asking endless questions about tools, while the girl liked to draw near him and hand him small pictures she made. He kept every one of them, folded carefully in his pocket. One afternoon, as the spring sun filtered through the windows, the boy asked if Jonathan could come to his school's art fair the next week. Claire hesitated before she answered for him. "He might be busy, sweetheart." Jonathan met her eyes and said gently, "I would like to come, if that is all right." The boy's face lit up with joy, and Claire could not bring herself to refuse. The art fair was small but cheerful. Children's drawings lined the gymnasium walls, and tables were covered in paper crafts and paints. Claire stood with the twins near their display, watching as they proudly pointed out their work to other parents. Jonathan arrived quietly, dressed simply, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers he had bought from a street vendor on his way. When the twins saw him, they waved eagerly. The girl ran over, grabbing his hand. "You came," she said happily. "You said you would, and you did." He smiled, his throat tightening at the simple faith in her words. "Of course I came. I would not miss it." Claire watched from a distance, her expression unreadable. When he approached her, he held out the flowers. "These are for the artists," he said softly. "Or maybe for their mother, who clearly raised them well." She accepted them hesitantly, her voice quieter than usual. "Thank you. You did not have to." "I wanted to," he replied. They stood together for a while, watching the twins laugh with their friends. The gym was filled with music and the sound of camera shutters clicking. For a moment, Jonathan allowed himself to breathe as if everything was normal, as if this could be their life. Then a familiar voice broke the moment. "Jonathan Reed," a man's voice said sharply. It was Mark Davidson, a board member from Jonathan's company, who was there with his own daughter. "I almost did not recognize you. What on earth are you doing here?" The question carried polite disbelief. Claire stiffened beside him. Jonathan smiled calmly. "Just attending a school event." "A school event?" Mark chuckled. "You? You usually avoid these things like the plague. His gaze moved between Jonathan and Claire, then to the twins. Is there some kind of partnership going on here I should know about? Jonathan's tone remained steady. It is personal, Mark, not business. The man smirked. Personal? That is new. Does the press know about this side of you? Claire's jaw tightened. Jonathan's voice cooled. If you value your position, you will not bring them into this. The words were quiet but carried authority. Mark's smile faltered. Of course, Jonathan. I did not mean anything by it. He walked away quickly. Claire exhaled slowly, tension easing from her shoulders. That was unnecessary, she murmured. No, Jonathan said. It was overdue. People like him forget that power is not everything. She gave him a long look, the faintest hint of approval in her eyes. Maybe you really are changing. I am trying, he said. Not for me, for them. They both looked toward the twins, who were now showing their drawings to a teacher. The little boy pointed proudly to his piece, a picture of 4 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sundae. This one, he told the teacher, is my mom, my sister, me, and our friend who helps us at the center. Jonathan felt his heart stop for a moment. Claire's hand trembled slightly, but she said nothing. The teacher smiled. That is beautiful, sweetheart. You have a wonderful family. The boy nodded happily. Jonathan swallowed hard, emotions rising like a tide he could not hold back. For the first time, he realized that maybe this was what family could mean: presence, not perfection. When the fair ended, Claire thanked him quietly for coming. They were happy, she said. That is what matters. They deserve happiness, he replied, even if I only get to stand on the sidelines. She looked at him, and something softened in her expression. Maybe that is where you start. As the sun set behind the school, Jonathan watched her lead the twins toward the car, their laughter echoing across the parking lot. It was a sound he would carry with him, a sound that felt like forgiveness waiting somewhere just beyond reach. The days that followed the art fair were quiet but filled with unspoken change. Jonathan Reed still kept his distance, but he sensed that Claire's resistance had softened slightly. She no longer avoided him when they crossed paths at the community center. Sometimes she even offered a faint smile, the kind that carried caution but also a small trace of warmth. The twins continued to greet him with excitement whenever he appeared. Their laughter had become something of a light in his week. One afternoon, Claire invited him to join a group picnic organized by the volunteers. It was a simple gesture, almost casual, yet it meant more to him than any award or contract he had ever received. The picnic took place in a small park near the river, where the trees leaned over the water and the air smelled of spring. Families spread blankets on the grass, children ran with kites, and music floated from a portable speaker somewhere nearby. Jonathan arrived carrying a basket of food he had prepared himself, though he was nervous about how it would taste. The twins ran to greet him, each holding a kite string tangled in their hands. "Can you help us?" the boy asked. Jonathan laughed softly. "I will do my best." Together they untangled the strings, and soon the kites were flying high, red and yellow against the wide blue sky. Claire watched from a short distance, her expression unreadable but no longer distant. When she finally joined him near the picnic blanket, she looked at the basket and raised an eyebrow. "You cooked?" "Tried to," he admitted. "If it is terrible, I will deny everything." She smiled faintly, tasting a sandwich. "It is actually good. Maybe you did learn something over the years." "Mostly humility," he said quietly. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the twins chase their kites. "They are happy," he murmured. "They remind me of what I used to believe life would be before I lost it all, chasing something that did not matter." Claire nodded. "They have a simple joy. I try to keep it that way." Jonathan hesitated before asking, "Do they ever ask about their father?" Her eyes stayed on the children. "Sometimes. I told them he was gone before they were born, but that he loved them from afar." His chest tightened at the quiet weight in her words. "You were kinder than I deserved," he said softly. "I did it for them, not for you," she replied. "Children deserve hope, not bitterness." The wind shifted, carrying laughter and the faint smell of grilled food from another family nearby. Jonathan glanced at her. "You always had that strength. I never understood it before." She gave a small shrug. "You never tried to." "You are right," he said honestly, "but I am trying now." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for a moment, the air between them stilled. "Why?" she asked simply. "Why now?" Jonathan exhaled. Because when I saw them, I saw myself. Not the man I became, but the man I could have been. I want to be worthy of the reflection they give me. She said nothing, but her gaze softened slightly before she turned away. The twins ran back to them, their cheeks flushed with joy. The girl climbed into Claire's lap, showing her a flower crown she had made. "Mom, look! I made this for you." "It is beautiful, sweetheart," Claire said, kissing her forehead. The boy tugged Jonathan's sleeve. "Do you want one too?" Jonathan smiled. "Of course. I would be honored." The boy ran off to pick more flowers, his laughter echoing through the park. Claire glanced at Jonathan. "You are good with them," she said quietly. "You always were. You just did not stay long enough to see it." The words carried no malice this time, only truth. "Maybe now I can stay," he said. "Not to replace anything, just to be there." She looked at him carefully. "If you stay, Jonathan, stay because it is right, not because it eases your guilt." "I understand," he said. The sunlight filtered through the branches, painting the ground with shifting patterns. The boy returned with the flower crown, placing it on Jonathan's head with a proud grin. Claire laughed softly, the sound like the first note of a song he had almost forgotten. For the first time in a decade, they shared that laughter together, and though it did not erase the past, it built a fragile bridge over it. When the afternoon faded into gold, Jonathan helped pack up their things, his hands moving easily beside hers. It was simple, ordinary, and yet to him, it felt like everything he had ever wanted, a beginning disguised as a quiet afternoon in the park. The following week, the air in Westbrook carried the scent of blooming lilacs, and the evenings stretched longer, painted in soft gold. Jonathan Reed had begun to find a rhythm in this new chapter of his life. Every few days, he visited the community center, sometimes to help, sometimes just to listen. The volunteers had stopped asking who he was. To them, he was simply Jonathan, the quiet man who always showed up, who fixed what was broken without fanfare. Claire noticed the change too. She no longer flinched when she saw him, and on some days, she even asked for his help. The twins had grown used to his presence, treating him as a friend who belonged to their small, happy world. One afternoon, as they cleaned up after a weekend class, Claire received a call that made her expression tighten. The community center director told her the city was planning to sell the building's lot to a developer. The renovation had made it more valuable, and the council saw an opportunity for profit. "They cannot do that," she said, pacing. "This place is home for dozens of families." Jonathan listened silently, then asked, "When is the hearing?" "Next Tuesday," she said. "They are calling for bids. Whoever offers more will take it." She sighed heavily, pressing a hand to her temple. "We do not have the kind of money to fight a developer." "But I do," Jonathan said softly. Claire turned to him sharply. "No," she said instantly. "Do not get involved." "Claire, this is not about me," he insisted. "This is about saving something that matters to you and to them." "It is not your place," she said. "If you do this, everyone will know. It will turn into a story, and this place will lose its purity." "Then let me do it quietly," he replied. "No publicity, no headlines, no one has to know." She stared at him, torn between pride and gratitude. "You always try to fix things with money," she said quietly. "But this time, it might be the only way," he answered. "Let me do this right." The week passed with tension and quiet hope. On the day of the hearing, Jonathan arrived early, dressed plainly, sitting at the back of the room. Developers filled the space with their lawyers and briefcases. Claire was there too, with a few volunteers and parents from the community center. She looked anxious but determined. When the bids opened, the first developer offered a sum that made her heart sink. The second offer was even higher. The chairman was about to close the discussion when a calm voice from the back interrupted. "I would like to submit a proposal," Jonathan said. Every head turned. Claire's eyes widened. "Sir, your name?" the chairman asked. "Jonathan Reed," he said simply. A murmur spread through the room. Everyone knew that name. The chairman adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Reed, are you proposing to purchase the property?" "Not to purchase," he said. "To preserve. I am offering to match the highest bid, but under one condition, that the property remains a community center, owned by a local trust. I will fund the maintenance indefinitely." The room went silent. The chairman looked stunned. "That is highly unusual." "So is destroying something that actually helps people," Jonathan replied. Claire stood frozen, emotion rising behind her composed exterior. The motion passed after a long discussion. The building was saved. When the meeting ended, she walked toward him slowly, her voice low. "Why did you do that?" "Because it was right," he said. "Because some things are worth protecting, even if I never set foot in them again." Her eyes glistened. "You do not even want credit?" "No," he said. "You built this place. I just made sure it would last." The twins ran to them, unaware of the gravity of what had just happened. "Mom, are we keeping the center?" the boy asked. Claire knelt and hugged them both tightly. "Yes, sweetheart, we are." She looked up at Jonathan, her voice trembling. "Thank you," he smiled faintly. "You do not owe me thanks. You owe yourself recognition for building something good." As the council hall emptied, Claire stood there for a long time, watching him walk away into the light filtering through the tall windows. For the first time, she realized that maybe redemption did not come in grand apologies but in quiet actions done for the right reasons. And for the first time since he had returned, she no longer saw the man who had left her. She saw the man who was finally learning how to stay. The morning after the council hearing, Westbrook woke to sunshine and laughter. The news had spread quickly within the neighborhood, though no one knew who had made the anonymous donation that saved the community center. People called it a miracle. Claire spent most of the day helping organize a small celebration for the volunteers and families. The twins were ecstatic, running around with balloons, shouting that the center was safe forever. When Jonathan Reed arrived, he stayed quietly in the background, watching it all unfold. He did not want to take attention away from the people who truly made the place special. Yet every now and then, his eyes met Claire's across the crowd, and she no longer looked at him like a stranger. When the sun began to set, Claire approached him near the playground, where the twins were taking turns on the swings. "You really did it," she said softly. "You kept your word." Jonathan smiled faintly. "You did all the hard work. I just made sure no one could take it away from you." She looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "You could have bought it outright and put your name on it, but you did not." "Names fade," he said quietly. "Good work lasts longer." She let out a small breath, something between a sigh and a laugh. "You have changed more than I thought possible." "Maybe I finally learned what matters," he replied. The sound of the twins' laughter carried through the air. The little boy ran to Jonathan, holding out a paper airplane he had made from a napkin. "Can you help me make it fly farther?" he asked. Jonathan knelt beside him, adjusting the folds carefully. "There," he said. "Try it now." The boy threw it, and the small plane glided farther than before. "You did it!" the boy shouted, jumping with joy. Claire smiled, watching them. "They really like you," she said quietly. "They trust you." "That means more than anything," he said, his voice low. "I do not take it lightly." She hesitated before asking, "Jonathan, what do you want from all this? You could go back to your world and never think of us again, but you are still here." He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I do not want anything," he said. "Not money, not forgiveness. I just want a chance to give back what I took. Time, care, presence, even if it is from a distance." Claire's eyes softened, though her voice remained steady. "You cannot undo the past." "I know," he said, "but I can choose to be better in the present." The twins called for them to join on the swings, and Claire walked over, pushing her daughter gently while Jonathan helped the boy. The scene was simple, quiet, and yet it carried a weight neither of them spoke about. Later, when the celebration ended, the families began to leave, and the sky turned a dusky purple. Claire lingered near her car, packing up leftover food. Jonathan offered to help, and she did not refuse. They loaded the last box into the trunk, and she turned to him. "I used to think you did not have a heart," she said. "Back then, it felt like you cared only about winning." He nodded slowly. "I did not understand what love meant then. I thought providing money was enough. I thought affection could wait until success came, but success without love is just noise." She looked at him, seeing honesty in his face. "You are not the same man I married," she said quietly, "and that is a good thing. You are not the same woman I left," he said gently, "and that is an even better thing." For a long moment, they simply stood there, the silence between them, no longer cold but full of something almost peaceful. The twins climbed into the back seat, still chattering about their balloons. Claire closed the car door and faced him one last time before leaving. "We will see you at the center next weekend," she asked. "If you want me there," he said. She smiled softly. "I think we do." He watched as the car pulled away, the taillights fading into the twilight. The sound of their laughter echoed faintly down the road, and Jonathan stood there under the fading light, realizing that this was what forgiveness felt like, not grand, not loud, but quiet and human. It was not about forgetting what he had done, but about learning to be the kind of man who would never make the same mistake again. And as the first stars appeared above Westbrook, he whispered to himself, "This time, I will stay." The following weekend arrived with warm sunlight and the sound of children playing echoing through the community center. Jonathan Reed showed up early, bringing breakfast for the volunteers and small toys for the children. He had learned to arrive quietly, to help without making himself the center of attention. When Claire arrived with the twins, she found him already cleaning paintbrushes from the previous day's art class. She smiled faintly. "You are here early again." He shrugged lightly. "Old habits. I used to show up early to conquer the day. Now I show up early to keep up with it." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "That is a better reason." The twins rushed past her, greeting Jonathan with excitement. "We made a surprise for you," the boy announced, pulling something from his backpack. It was a simple drawing, colored with bright crayons. 4 figures stood together under a big yellow sundae. Above them, in uneven letters, were the words, "Our family." Jonathan froze. His throat tightened as he looked at the picture. "This is beautiful," he said softly. "You drew this?" The boy nodded proudly. "Mom helped us a little." Claire's smile was gentle, but her eyes shimmered with emotion. "They wanted to thank you for everything you have done." Jonathan stared at the drawing, his heart heavy with gratitude and longing. "This means more to me than you will ever know," he said quietly. The morning went on with laughter and activity. Jonathan helped the twins plant small flowers near the playground, while Claire organized supplies inside. For the first time, everything felt natural between them, as if the walls of the past had slowly crumbled. When lunch came, the volunteers gathered around the picnic tables. The twins sat beside Jonathan, telling him stories about their school projects, their voices overlapping with excitement. He listened carefully, smiling at every detail. After the meal, Claire approached him with 2 cups of coffee. "Peace offering," she said lightly, handing him one. "You do not owe me peace," he said. "You already gave me something better, the chance to be part of this." She looked at him thoughtfully. "You have earned it, Jonathan. You did not force your way in. You showed up and stayed. That is more than I ever expected." Her words touched him deeply. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That means everything to me." The afternoon sun grew warmer, casting golden light across the park. The twins ran off to play on the swings, their laughter ringing through the air. Claire sat beside Jonathan on the bench, her gaze following them. "I used to worry every day," she said softly, "about how I would raise them alone, how I would keep everything together. There were nights I thought I would break." Jonathan listened silently, his eyes fixed on the ground. "I am sorry you had to go through that," he said. "You should not have been alone." "We survived," she said, "and I learned that strength does not come from being unbreakable. It comes from rebuilding after you fall apart." He turned to look at her, admiration shining in his eyes. "You are the strongest person I know." "Maybe," she said with a small smile, "but I am tired of being strong all the time." The confession hung in the air, fragile and real. Jonathan wanted to reach for her hand, but he stopped himself. Instead, he said softly, "You do not have to be alone anymore. Even if all I can offer is support, I will be here." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes reflecting both hesitation and trust. "Maybe that is what I needed to hear," she said finally. The twins called for her then, laughing as they swung higher. She stood, smiling at them. "Come on, they are going to make me nervous." Jonathan rose too, walking beside her toward the playground. The sunlight caught the edges of her hair, and for a brief second, he saw the woman he had fallen in love with years ago, not just the mother, not just the survivor, but the same Claire whose kindness had once saved him from himself. As the day faded into soft orange light, the twins handed him the flower crown they had made before. "This one is for you," the girl said, "because you are part of the team now." Jonathan knelt to their level, smiling through the ache in his chest. "That is the best title I have ever had." Claire watched them with quiet affection, her eyes warm but unreadable. When they finally said goodbye that evening, she turned to him before getting into her car. "Thank you for staying," she said. "I did not stay before," he replied softly. "This time I mean it." As she drove away with the twins waving from the back seat, Jonathan stood in the fading light, holding the crayon drawing close to his chest. For the first time in 10 years, he felt whole. The months passed, and summer arrived in Westbrook with the warmth of renewal. The community center was thriving. The gardens the children had planted bloomed in bright colors. The walls gleamed with fresh paint, and the sound of laughter filled every corner. Jonathan Reed had quietly become part of that rhythm. He helped fix broken benches, read stories to the younger kids, and always made sure the twins had what they needed for their small adventures. To everyone else, he was just Mr. Jonathan, the man who always showed up when something needed doing. One Saturday morning, the twins organized a small play at the center. They had spent weeks rehearsing with Claire and the other children. When Jonathan arrived, the twins ran to him immediately. "You came," the boy said, smiling wide. "You promised." "And I keep my promises now," Jonathan said with a gentle smile. The hall was decorated with paper stars and hand-painted signs. Parents and volunteers filled the seats, chatting softly while the children took their places on the makeshift stage. The twins were nervous but excited, glancing at their mother for reassurance. Claire smiled back, mouthing the words, "You will be amazing." The lights dimmed, and the little play began. It was a simple story about kindness, forgiveness, and finding family where you least expect it. Jonathan sat in the front row, his hands clasped tightly. As the twins spoke their lines, something in their words pierced through him. When the boy said, "Sometimes people leave, but that does not mean they stop caring," Jonathan felt his throat close. The girl added, "Sometimes they just have to find their way back." The audience clapped, but he could not move. When the play ended, Claire walked over with the twins, both still beaming with pride. "What did you think?" she asked. "I think," he said softly, "that I just watched the most beautiful truth I have ever heard." The twins laughed, wrapping their arms around him. For a brief moment, it felt like the world had finally come full circle. Later that evening, after the celebration ended and the families began to leave, Claire and Jonathan stood outside under the fading light. The twins were playing nearby, chasing fireflies with small jars in their hands. "They wrote that story themselves," Claire said quietly. "I think they understand more than they let on." "Children always do," he replied. "They see what we try to hide." She turned to face him. "You have been here for months now, helping, showing up, keeping your word. I do not think I ever thanked you properly." "You do not have to," he said. "This place, those kids, you gave me something I did not know I needed." "And what is that?" she asked. "A reason to be better," he said simply. The silence between them was soft, filled with the sound of crickets and laughter. Claire looked at him, her eyes warm but steady. "I do not know what the future looks like, Jonathan," she said honestly, "but I know you have changed. And for the first time, I believe it is real." He nodded slowly. "Whatever comes next, I just want to be part of their world, even if it is only as the man who shows up when he is needed." She smiled, a quiet, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Maybe that is exactly what we need." The twins ran toward them, holding their jars up proudly, tiny lights flickering inside. "Look, Mom, look, Mr. Jonathan, we caught the stars." The boy's voice was full of wonder. Jonathan knelt beside them, his eyes soft. "You did," he said. "You caught the light." Claire watched them, her heart full. The moment felt sacred, like forgiveness had finally settled where bitterness once lived. As the fireflies danced in the darkening sky, Jonathan realized that redemption was not a single act or a second chance it was choosing, every day, to love quietly, to show up, and to never walk away again. When the night deepened, Claire gathered the twins and turned to him. "We will see you tomorrow?" "You will," he said, smiling. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in a decade, that promise was not just words, it was truth. Under the soft glow of streetlights, they parted ways, but the air between them carried peace instead of regret. The man who once walked away had finally found his way home, not through wealth or power, but through the simple, unshakable grace of love returned. In a heartwarming tale of redemption and second chances, a powerful CEO learns the meaning of love and forgiveness after abandoning his family a decade earlier. Set in a quiet town where kindness still matters, this emotional journey follows a man rediscovering his humanity through humility, sacrifice, and unconditional love. Perfect for fans of cinematic storytelling and touching millionaire stories that blend drama with hope. This narrative captures how true wealth is not measured in money, but in compassion and the courage to make things right. Through tears, laughter, and reflection, it reminds every listener that the greatest millionaire stories are not about fortune, but about finding the heart that money once replaced. If you love deeply emotional millionaire stories where power meets redemption, this story will stay with you long after it ends. Join us for one of the most inspiring millionaire stories ever told, where loss transforms into healing and love becomes the only currency that truly matters.